following a road rage incident that led to a traffic collision in St. Petersburg, Florida. A brother and sister were charged with attempted murder. An unnamed 21-year-old motorcyclist was heading east on Central Avenue in September of 2022. Simultaneously, Solimar Rosario was in the passenger seat of a Lincoln Mercury driven by her brother, Narciso. Following an unspecified argument, 31-year-old Solimar hung out the window of the vehicle and started taunting the motorcyclist. 32-year-old Narciso then intentionally drove into the rider, sending his motorcycle into oncoming westbound traffic, whereupon he collided head-on with a truck. The siblings then fled the scene, leaving the motorcyclist fighting for his life on the side of the road. He survived and was taken to the intensive care unit of a local hospital, where he was placed on a ventilator and in a medically induced coma. It suffered multiple broken bones and a brain bleed. Solimar and Narciso were subsequently arrested and charged with attempted murder in the second degree. Number 7. Niwaka and Sean hurt. On July the 31st of 2019, an emergency call was placed from a home in Jonesboro, Georgia, claiming that a man by the name of Sean Jackson had gone missing. His son Nicholas had been awoken by Niwaka Hurt, Jackson's living girlfriend, who reported that her partner had left home in the middle of the night. As the investigation progressed, the authorities learned that Jackson had been caught cheating by Niwaka shortly before his disappearance. The couple fought in front of his mistress's house and continued arguing upon returning home. Nicholas told investigators that they'd both calmed down by nightfall. Roughly 3 weeks after the man's disappearance on August 19th, the body of a man was discovered in a shallow grave in Jefferson County, Alabama. An analysis of the tattoos, fingerprints, and clothing confirmed the remains as Jackson's. The police suspected that Niwaka had been responsible for the murder but wouldn't have enough evidence to arrest her until April of 2023, when she was taken into custody along with her brother, Sean. The investigation determined that on the night of Jackson's disappearance, the woman had shot him 3 times in the head as he slept. She then called her brother, who helped her dispose of the body. On April the 20th, the siblings were both charged with malice murder, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, tampering with evidence, and concealing the death of another person. Number 6. Christopher Buckner and Timothy Savoy. In the summer of 2014, law enforcement in Guyton, Georgia, was called to reports of a prowler outside the Countryside Baptist Church. When they arrived at the location in the early morning hours, officers encountered 20-year-old Christopher Buckner and her brother, Timothy Savoy, aged 25. The latter initially told the police that he was walking his sister back to her home. Within minutes, the pair admitted that they'd had intercourse 3 times in a tractor-trailer parked outside the church. The brother and sister blamed their behavior on the fact that they'd recently watched The Notebook together. The 2004 romantic drama movie, which is based on a Nicholas Sparks novel, stars Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling as a young couple who fall in love in the 1940s. Buckner and Savoy claimed that the movie had been the inspiration for their actions. They were arrested on multiple charges that included incest and prowling. Number 5. Destiny and Dexter Goins. In late February of 2023, the Lake Worth Police Department in Texas responded to reports of a theft in progress at a local store. Officers intercepted a vehicle as it was making its getaway. The driver refused to pull over and a chase ensued, but the vehicle eventually came to a stop after crashing into a field near the 3100 block of Dakota Trail. 3 people emerged from the car and fled on foot. 22-year-old Destiny Goins was quickly arrested at the scene. The 2 others, one of whom was 19-year-old Dexter Goins, Destiny's brother, were initially able to get away. The police searched the neighborhood with helicopters and K-9 units, but Dexter still eluded them. The man was eventually chased down by officers and taken into custody after he'd been spotted running by a resident. The 3rd suspect wasn't immediately arrested. In the Goins getaway car, the police found over $2,000 worth of stolen merchandise, including dozens of scented candles. In the days that followed the siblings' arrest on charges of engaging in organized criminal activity, investigators linked them to at least 11 other thefts perpetrated in North Texas cities, including Irving, Fort Worth, Louisville, Weatherford, and Carrollton. The total combined loss that the Goins siblings had caused was estimated at close to $28,000. As of the latest information available on the matter, the investigation was still in progress and the siblings faced the possibility of further charges. Number 4. Kimberly and Alexa Torres-Marin. 26-year-old Kimberly Torres-Marin and her sister Alexa, aged 19, were stopped by deputies in Maricopa County, Arizona, in September of 2022 while they were heading to Phoenix. Following a search of their vehicle, law enforcement found 850,000 counterfeit pills. They had been placed in duffel bags, and subsequent analysis revealed that they were laced with fentanyl. The synthetic opioid is considered highly dangerous due to its potency that makes it deadly, even in very low doses. Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell told the media that 2 out of 5 of the counterfeit pills that came across the border were laced with the drug. Mitchell was quoted as saying, "These drugs are being marketed to our youth in the most proliferous ways and are being produced in candy-like colors." The Torres-Marin sisters were arrested on 1 count each of sale or transportation of narcotic drugs, a Class 2 felony. Number 3. Jayati and Kieran Matharu. The lives of sisters Jayati and Kieran Matharu, who hailed from a middle-class Canadian family, changed abruptly in the late 2000s after Jayati met a Nigerian oil magnate. The duo would go on to have relationships with a number of wealthy men from Nigeria who funded their lavish lifestyle. They became known as the Canadian Kardashians and were frequently featured in tabloids and gossip blogs in the African country. Some media outlets described them as high-paid escorts. In December of 2016, Jayati and Kieran were arrested by law enforcement in Lagos. They were accused of trying to extort Femi Otedola, a politically powerful oil tycoon worth a reported $1.8 billion. The sisters allegedly threatened Otedola that they would release proof he was cheating on his wife if he didn't pay them off. The Matharus were also accused of operating a scam that involved recording their trysts with high-ranking Nigerian men. The duo allegedly ran the gossip website Niger Gist Live. Unless their money demands were met, they reportedly threatened to use the site to release compromising videos, photos, and recordings of the men in their company. The sisters denied ownership of the website when questioned by the authorities. They were then taken to a rat-infested jail cell that had a few pieces of foam for beds and a toilet in the form of a hole in the floor. Jayati and Kieran were later moved to a hotel by the airport and locked in a room with bars on the windows and guards outside the door. They were detained for roughly 18 days and only released after they agreed to admit on video that they ran Niger Gist Live and apologized to Otedola and his family. They were banned from returning to Nigeria. Once back in their native Canada, the sisters denounced the confession video and claimed they were used as scapegoats for the rumors circulating on the website. Number 2. Wanda and Shantae Jones. In July of 2018, police in Newport News, Virginia, arrested sisters Wanda and Shantae Jones for an assault that happened in the 6000 block of Jefferson Avenue. The incident took place on July the 3rd when 32-year-old Wanda entered the residence of her ex-boyfriend to confront him and his current girlfriend. Wanda attacked the former and then directed her rage towards his girlfriend when she tried to intervene. During the assault, Wanda bit the other woman on the chest and pulled out clumps of her hair. Shantae joined in the attack and sprayed the couple with mace. About a week after the attack was reported, the sisters were arrested, with Wanda facing an assault charge and Shantae being charged with 2 counts of malicious injury by acid. If you haven't yet seen our earlier release on when business partners go wrong, then we still have that one lined up for you immediately after number 1. Stay tuned if you'd like. Number 1. Hector Gutierrez and Maria Hernandez. On May the 25th of 2015, Las Vegas police received reports that a man had been attacked near the intersection of Buffalo Drive and Eldora Avenue, just south of Sahara Avenue. Responding officers found that the victim, Enrique Hernandez, had been gruesomely murdered. His wife, 32-year-old Maria, told the police that an unknown assailant had come at him with a hatchet. Enrique was hacked repeatedly in the neck area until his head was only held to the body by a few ligaments. There were defensive wounds that indicated he'd fought for his life. The Idaho couple had traveled to Las Vegas for a quinceañera. Maria claimed that after dropping off their children with a relative, they decided to go dancing at a bar in the city's east. They then got lost on the way back and started experiencing car trouble. Enrique got out and checked on their minivan, at which point he was hacked from behind by the suspect, who then fled in the couple's car. A manhunt for the hatchet murderer ensued, and the Hernandez van was found several miles away from the scene of the attack. Officers discovered a knife under the front seat and a trail of blood leading away from the vehicle, from which they deduced that the suspect had been hurt. The police got a call from a local hospital informing them that a man had been brought in with a stab wound to his abdomen. Investigators interviewed the person in question and found that he was 22-year-old Hector Gutierrez, Maria's brother. He claimed that he'd been stabbed during a mugging the previous night. However, the police learned that the Hernandez van had been pulled over prior to Enrique's murder and that Hector had been a passenger. His shoes matched with the bloody footprints found at the scene. When pressed further, Hector admitted that he'd killed Enrique but claimed he'd been pressured into doing so by his sister. A few months prior, Enrique had discovered that Maria was having an affair. The woman subsequently elicited Hector's help in killing her husband, claiming he was abusive towards her and was threatening to prevent her from seeing their 4 children. Hector reluctantly agreed to the murder plot. The trio had actually gone to the bar together, and after the traffic stop, Maria, the designated driver, feigned car trouble. She'd brought the murder weapon beforehand and hidden it in the vehicle. When Enrique got out, she gave Hector the signal and he struck him 5 times from behind with the hatchet. The victim was still able to fight back and stab Hector. Maria then held her husband's arms back as her brother dealt the fatal blows. Investigators found no indication that Enrique had been abusive towards his spouse, and multiple sources claimed he was committed to mending their marriage. Hector and Maria pleaded guilty to the murder in 2017. The former was given a 20 to 50-year sentence, while his sister was sentenced to 25 to 70 years. Number 9. Genepsi Meza Cabello. Florida resident Genepsi Meza Cabello was accused of revenge killing her late husband's business partner, Ilan Nissim. The 37-year-old claimed that she was acting in self-defense when she fatally shot Nissim in 2008, just a month after her husband's murder. However, her attorney's attempt to use the stand your ground law in her defense was denied by the case's presiding judge. Nissim and Orlando Meza, Cabello's husband, had allegedly been involved in illicit activities together. Meza Cabello suspected Nissim of being behind her husband's murder, but before any arrest could be made, she made a 911 call claiming that the man had entered her home and begun acting threateningly, prompting her to fire the fatal rounds. Detectives suspected that Nissim had been lured into a trap, but initially had no evidence to arrest Meza Cabello. That changed when an informant working on the case recorded the suspect admitting that she was worried the police wouldn't be able to catch Nissim, and she wanted an eye for an eye, for his daughter to grow up without a father, just like my son. In November of 2014, Meza Cabello was sentenced to life in prison for the killing, a decision she attempted to appeal, but the ruling was officially upheld on May the 10th of 2017. Number 8. Chris Smith. On December the 7th of 2018, 8 years after murdering his business partner, Chris Smith, California man Edward Shin was convicted on a charge of murder for financial gain. Although the victim had last been seen on June the 4th of 2010, family members continued to receive emails from him for several months thereafter. In his messages, Smith claimed to have sold all of his shares of the business to his partner in order to travel the world with a Playboy model. 41-year-old Shin had been suspected of previous crimes, including staging his own kidnapping to scam his parents out of $1 million. He was eventually brought to trial by one of his victims, Joseph Gray, in order to pay $700,000 in restitution. Smith, who co-owned the 800 Exchange, a debt consolidation company with Shin, was worried that his partner might steal from the business, voicing his concerns to his lawyer in an email that read, "We need to make sure he doesn't have room for fraud." Soon after, Smith's attitude abruptly shifted, and he explained to his attorney, via email, that Shin would buy out his shares to afford him the opportunity to purchase a 40-foot yacht and travel the world. The emails came to a sudden halt on December the 26th of 2010, prompting Smith's family and friends to contact the authorities. An investigation was launched, and although Shin initially denied any involvement in his partner's disappearance, he eventually admitted that Smith had accidentally hit his head on the corner of a desk during an altercation between them, resulting in his death. The man claimed to have cleaned up the scene in the accident's aftermath, but refused to inform detectives of the body's whereabouts, and Smith's remains were never recovered. The jury rejected Shin's version of the fatal events and ultimately convicted him after 6 hours of deliberation. Number 7. Elizabeth Zhong. In 2013, Auckland, New Zealand residents Elizabeth Zhong and Fang Sun partnered up to form Sunbow Limited, an investment firm that specialized in the respective film and vineyard industries. Their partnership was described by Zhong's daughter as one of trust until conflict arose between the 55-year-old majority owner and 48-year-old Sun in 2019. From April to June of that year, the business partners were involved in a bitter legal dispute, with Sun claiming Zhong had misappropriated more than $26 million from the company. This led to Sunbow Limited going bankrupt and having to be sold in order to repay its insurmountable debts. On November the 27th of 2020, Zhong's lifeless body was found stuffed into a suitcase in the back of her Land Rover with over 20 stab wounds. During the weeks leading up to her murder, the victim had told several people that she'd begun to fear for her life, and Sun immediately became the homicide investigation's prime suspect. On June the 2nd of 2022, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Number 6. Michael Modesty. On May the 23rd of 2016, Australian law enforcement closed a missing persons case following a 15-day investigation. It was officially determined that 33-year-old Michael Modesty had been murdered by a contact he'd made while dabbling with illicit substances. Modesty, a businessman from Adelaide, had last been seen on May the 8th after returning home from a business trip to Bangkok, where he had allegedly purchased silicone. Investigators discovered his car, which had been abandoned near his home, while his phone and wallet remained in his apartment. Police officers detected no signs that a break-in had occurred, implying that the perpetrator had been known to the victim. Although Modesty had a previous arrest related to illegal substances 2 years prior to his disappearance, the police reportedly noted that there was no sign of sophisticated trafficking on his part. The strangeness of his disappearance, however, as well as the recent trip to the Philippines, led authorities to believe that the victim had in fact been involved with traffickers and had been murdered due to a business disagreement. As of the latest developments, no suspects had been identified in Modesty's murder. Number 5. Robert Crane. Arizona man Robert Crane's murder remained a mystery for almost 20 years after his initial disappearance from the Phoenix store he co-owned on February the 3rd of 1996. The victim's wife, Pat, had initially been suspicious of her husband's business partner, Dean Babbitt, but the latter denied any involvement in the crime. In 2014, however, cold case detectives reopened the case, utilizing technology that hadn't been available during the original investigation. It was subsequently determined that after Crane and Babbitt's store had gone out of business, the pair were cleaning the building when the former was fatally shot in the back office, while his partner was allegedly working in the front. Babbitt, who was 69 at the time of the investigation's reopening, was suspected of carrying out the shooting himself and lying about his position within the store during initial questioning. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Detective Clark Schwarzkopf, who was involved with the investigation from the very beginning, indicated that he hoped the trial would bring long-awaited closure to the victim's family. Number 4. Ahmed Slayer. Louisiana businessman Ahmed Slayer was arrested on February the 2nd of 2022 for attempting to hire a hitman to murder his business partner. The men had purchased a gas station together on the outskirts of Slidell, a town located roughly 30 minutes from New Orleans. 30-year-old Slayer arranged a meeting with the would-be killer at his business. After discussing the details of the planned assassination, the prospective hitman contacted the authorities and informed them of his conversation with Slayer. Neither the identity of the business partner nor the police informant were released to the public in the immediate aftermath. A warrant was issued for Slayer's arrest and he voluntarily turned himself in shortly thereafter. His bond was set at $225,000 while detectives continued their investigation. Number 3. Edward Gregory. In December of 1999, Norman Schlunt and his wife Angela Soon Hee Kim murdered their business partner, 62-year-old Edward Gregory, by grounding up sleeping pills into his chili and placing a plastic bag over his head. The Phoenix, Arizona couple cleaned up the evidence of the crime before contacting the police, and Gregory was initially believed to have passed of natural causes. That assumption was challenged in 2006 when Kim openly admitted to the crime to a friend, who in turn contacted the authorities. Gregory and Schlunt had taken out a life insurance policy together before the murder, naming each other as the beneficiaries. By the time the perpetrators were arrested, they had already spent most of the insurance money they had been awarded in the wake of their partner's death. Schlunt was sentenced to life in prison and also ordered to pay restitution to the victims' daughters, Trenna Landers and Chrisana Clark. In 2014, Schlunt's bank accounts were emptied to uphold the court's ruling, prompting him to argue that his rights had been violated. The DA rejected the petition, claiming that the right to prompt restitution overrules the prisoner's property exemption. Number 2. Shane and Sabrina Santa Cruz. Shane Santa Cruz was arrested on September the 9th of 2022 for stealing over $25,000 from the business he and his spouse shared with a third partner. The Parkland, Florida resident described himself online as the Chief Executive Officer of Better Addiction Care and founder of KO Addiction, two organizations dedicated to helping people with mental health and substance abuse issues. Santa Cruz, along with his 33-year-old wife, Sabrina, allegedly used unlawfully obtained money to make more than 400 Amazon purchases, as well as pay for their phone bills between 2017 and 2018. When Santa Cruz was confronted by the couple's business partner, whose identity wasn't disclosed to the media, he vehemently denied the accusations of fraud, prompting the partner to contact the authorities. A warrant was subsequently issued for Santa Cruz's arrest, and he was apprehended without incident. Sabrina turned herself in the following day, whereupon she was charged with grand theft in the second degree. Both husband and wife were released on a $3,500 bond pending the continuation of their cases' legal proceedings. Number 1. Ross Byrne. On April the 8th of 2022, 58-year-old Ross Byrne was sentenced to 20 years in prison after confessing that he'd plotted to murder his business partner, among several other crimes. Jerry Moore, Byrne's former roommate and co-owner of the best dang bakery around in Woodstock, Georgia, was found stabbed to death in January of 2014. The ensuing autopsy uncovered the presence of more than 32 stab wounds on the victim's body. Homicide detectives began to look into people who would benefit from Moore's demise, noting that his bakery had been struggling financially. Evidence recovered during the investigation revealed that Jonathan Wheeler, one of the bakery's employees, had been hired by Byrne to murder his business partner. Wheeler, who was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, implicated Byrne as the intellectual author of the murder plot and told detectives that his boss had helped clean up the victim's blood from the crime scene. The accusations were strengthened by the fact that Byrne had become the sole owner of the bakery after his partner's death, providing a potential financial motive for the killing as well. After obtaining a search warrant for the suspect's home, officers discovered several of the victim's possessions inside. Byrne was ultimately found guilty of criminal solicitation, as well as conspiracy to conceal the death of another, hindering the apprehension of another, and violations of the RICO Act. Thanks for watching. Who would you pick to rob a bank with? Your sibling or your best friend? Let us know in the comment section below.